criminals may try to get in one last hurrah before policy changes for gas stations.
Hey, Mike, we talk about skimmers all the time with respect to ATMs and stuff, but it looks like you were looking into a story about skimmers at gas stations and some recent changes in policy there and activity related around that.
Yeah, so actually the policy changes went in effect back in 2015. So when they introduced the new, the chip and PIN, the EVM transactions, they put an exemption in place specifically for gas pumps. So basically, whenever there was any fraud due to skimming, gas stations were not liable. So they basically put an exemption in that went to 2017. Then they delayed it again to this October. So October 2020, that exemption basically is up. And from then on, gas stations will be responsible for any fraud due to skimming at their properties. So there's speculation this may cause a rise in activity against gas stations or fuel companies. They're particularly vulnerable because they still utilize mostly the magnetic strips versus the chips and pins. At the fuel pumps, they usually don't comply with the PCI compliance that requires that you encrypt any of the strip data in transit, or if you store it like locally, like say in the back next to the Pepsi machine on the database, you need encrypted there. They typically don't. So, kind of prime targets not only for skimmers, but to access it, any of the, networking for any of these companies, any of the point of sale networks that they have, where the track 1, track 2 data is kind of available to be compromised. The big reason there's been this exemption, this constant delay is, it's a large cost for gas stations, especially smaller ones, to do a complete, retrofit and replace all these gas pumps. So they've been kind of pushing things off, to the point where, the exemption is going to run out. And now these gas companies are going to start putting some concessions in place to make sure that this data is not being stolen.
Did I understand right that as of October last year, the gas stations are liable if there is fraud, so that they would have to, as opposed to like maybe a credit card company or something, or like what was the story there?
Yeah, so it's October 2020, so there's still another 9-10 months, and again, given that window is kind of closing, the expectation is there may be a rise. What I found most interesting, though, in the story, as you kind of read through it, is just because in 2020 October comes around doesn't mean everybody's going to replace all their gas pumps, and some of these smaller businesses may look at different compensating controls, right? So I was reading, they got to kind of weigh the risk, right, of compromise to kind of what the cost is of doing kind of a full retrofit of all their pumps. So they talked about installing cameras, requiring that customers come inside and pay, right, at the register. Looking at maybe doing some kind of workarounds for encryption, right? If they are storing, the data locally in the before they send it to the bank. So it's kind of funny thinking about not just people apply these risk mitigation, workarounds when you think about kind of all across the industry, not just gas stations, but kind of to get around this. This expiration that they're going to become liable. To think, am I going to spend? I think they were quoting it can cost up towards $150,000 to completely replace all your pumps, or kind of throw some cameras in place and just, I live out, I'm out in the rural road. I'm not going to worry about, the risk of someone putting a skimmer on. So it's kind of interesting when you look at kind of the risk management they think about, with falling victim to one of these.
Right.
Yeah. I was in Germany last year, and one thing that I noticed, the first thing was that they're probably cash first, credit card second. But halfway through the trip, I realized my credit card had never left my hand. So they bring the little readers to you, and for gas stations, you have to walk in and pay at the register, and you still don't give them the credit card. You swipe and so like it's just interesting because here, like at least in New Jersey, I know that in a lot of other, we probably the only state left where we
can't pump our own
gas, so we have to hand the credit card to a stranger. We don't see it for whatever many minutes. And that's always been odd to me that my credit card disappears from my hand for like a couple minutes. Sometimes I leave it at the pump, so like I don't see it for the whole transaction. And you know, there is a big gap of time there where it could have been skimmed. So like, I'm wondering, at least for New Jersey, if that's also going to affect us for that particular reason. But yeah, my credit card should never leave my hand, I guess, is the moral of the story.
That I guess would be a more ideal situation.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I went to the gas station last night, and I pulled up to the pump, and you know, I am in New Jersey, so we don't pump our own gas.
Right.
I don't know why. But in any event, the guy comes up, and he takes my credit card. He goes, "Oh, this isn't going to work, but I'll try it." And I'm like, "What?" And he put it in. He goes, "No, you got the chip." And it's a major chain, you know, but I guess they're starting to enforce this policy now. So he actually ran it as cash, and then they had to take the card inside, run it through the inside one, because the gas pumps, because I guess they got the chip and pin on a machine on in the store itself, but the gas pumps didn't have that feature, and they could tell that there was a chip, so it wouldn't process it. So then he went into a whole story about apologize, you know, it's these new fraud restrictions. I said, I kind of know about this. We're covering a story on it tomorrow. And he's like, what? So I guess it is kind of catching up with, you know, reality, or at least I'm seeing that some of the gas stations in my area, at least, are taking some efforts to try to comply with this upcoming, you know, legislation or whatever it is.
So I guess so in our case, our credit card's going to disappear for longer.
Yeah, that's it's not great. I was like ready to get out of the car and go into the store with my card, but whatever. I think it was like just this week, maybe it might be a January thing.
Gotcha.
Because it hasn't happened there before, and maybe at the beginning of this year, they said we're going to lay down the law and you got to start figuring out a plan.
Right.
Because this is the first time I've been there this year and ran into that situation. So.
Interesting. Yeah, well, now I'm going to keep an eye on that for sure.
Yeah.
If it affects any of my gas filling up abilities.
And, you know, to people in general, you know, like I said at the beginning, we talk about ATMs, and I think people are pretty aware when you go to put your ATM card in to look for anything that might be artificially attached to the ATM or that looks sketchy.
Yeah.
Even though there's some really good skimmers out there that are hard to spot. But the same would apply to a gas pump. And, you know, there are definitely criminal rings out there putting skimmers on gas pumps.
Right.
So like Mike said, we might see more activity around here trying to, you know, get as much out of that channel of crime using gas pump skimmers before this legislation goes in place, because after October 2020, they probably won't be able to do that much anymore once everybody's compliant.
Right.
The expectation is that if you make the gas stations liable come October of this year for any fraudulent transactions that occur, they're probably going to take steps to upgrade their gas pumps so that they don't have any possibility of having fraud and skimmers occur in their gas pumps.